Welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to be getting all the Grand Prix drivetrain bolted together and bolted in the car. So I have the LS4 ready to go, but before I bolted the transmission, I need to put the new Moroso oil pan onto the engine. And this is a special oil pan because the starter now bolts to the bottom of the oil pan because there is no place to bolt it on the transmission anymore. So I need to do that. Then we'll start grinding. I'll probably end up taking that exhaust manifold off so I can have better access, but I need to grind the side of the block as well as the side of transmission. Then we can get everything bolted together, and then I can get these solid mounts on it as well as some other mounts on it. So I showed putting the transmission onto the engine, but before I did and didn't really show you what was going on, I wanted to go over the modifications. So on the engine block right here, you want to grind down this area right here. This isn't as important because this is where it is contacting. So you're going to get an oil pan gasket a little bit, but it doesn't matter. So we have ground that down, and then you also want to clearance this as well. You pretty much just want you know, probably like 2 to 3 mils of clearance in between. I have the same thing going on right here. Most of the time they tell you to just cut out this whole section. I really didn't feel like doing that just because I knew I could get it a little bit smoother, and it has the same clearance, so it doesn't really matter. Then on this hole right here, this isn't a through hole, it's a dowel hole, but on here there is a bolt hole, so you just drill it through so you can bolt it to the engine block. So you have 4 bolts here, and then there's 1 strap right here. I saw a few people actually drilled their engine blocks and then made a plate, and it looks like it works really good. But there's a strap, there's 4 bolts, shouldn't be that big of a deal. Another thing I had to do, I have the Moroso oil pan. I had to grind this right here down, and then back here it says to clearance this area right here. But once I put it up, it really didn't need to be clearance because it doesn't interfere with any of this stuff. So I'm not exactly sure why that is. On this side, it said to clearance it, but I didn't, and it's perfectly fine. LS4 is now completely bolted to the 4080 transmission, and now I'm really excited. I can't wait to drive the car because I can push the LS to its limits and not have to worry about the transmission blowing up. So like I said before, I'm gonna run this thing naturally aspirated before I turbocharge it. So I threw the downpipe on it. I have the crossover pipe modified. So if you're going turbo, you're not gonna have to worry about this. But if you just want a 4080 in your stock LS4 car, you're gonna have to modify this pipe or just put a notch in it. That notch isn't gonna really restrict flow enough to matter or do anything. So I would just pretty much notch it. Then the gear selector doesn't interfere with the exhaust and you really don't have to do much. I'm also gonna heat wrap that because it did have shielding on it, but the shielding was too large. And once you grind off those rivets, it's kind of a pain to put them back on. So now that this is all said and done, I know a lot of people are probably pretty afraid of doing this swap because you have to grind on your engine block and you have to grind on the transmission case. And if you go too far, you're pretty much gonna ruin the engine or the transmission, but there is quite a bit of material. So what I did was, you want pretty much a thickness, a business card or a glove box, it's like 2 to 3 mils of clearance. And the clearance is down here in between the block and here, let me get that in there because it's kind of a pain to get it. But you can see this fits and doesn't get hung up anywhere on the engine block or the transmission case. So that's all you're modifying right there. And the same thing goes for this right here. And then people might be worried about the bolting. So all the bolts, these 4 bolts, this one, remember we drilled it out, but these 4 bolts right here on the top, they all are factory bolts. So you don't have to modify anything. There's dowels. The tranny sits perfectly located, centered onto the engine. So you don't have to worry about anything like that. The only bolt that's an issue is this one back here. And eventually I might just tap the block and then run another bolt through it. I've seen people do that. There's also a clamp, but then you have to grind this boss right there down. And if I do put a bolt through it, I don't want to have that ground down. So I'm pretty excited. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to throw the steam vents on. So I got new steam vent gaskets, and I'm also doing the mod because the front steam vent is only the only one open. The rears are blocked off. So if you go get a truck steam vent, you can put one in the back and it's over on the edge, so it doesn't, you don't have to worry about the throttle body. If I use this one, it's in the center and it would interfere. So now we have steam vent ports all connected. We don't have to worry about air bubbles or air pockets or anything forming. And then I got a tranny pan gasket and a new tranny filter. So then we won't have to worry about this. Tranny actually only had 94,000 miles on it, but I haven't opened it. I can look at how much material's on the magnet. I could clean everything up, put new filter in it, new fluid in it, and it'll be good to go. And I don't think we'll have any issues with this. The LS4 is pretty much ready to go back in the car. I've been modifying / working on the wiring harness and cleaning a lot of stuff up. So on the coil packs, they have this weird sub harness that I really have never liked. So I deleted that, especially since these are the LS9 style coils. They just look a lot cleaner. Plus, if I get aftermarket valve covers, then these will bolt on and it won't actually allow this bracket to bolt on because these coils will bolt directly to the valve covers, kind of just like the LS in my 240. And pretty much just cleaned everything up. So I ran out of zip ties, but it looks a lot better than it did, especially once it has some sheathing around it. It'll look really, really good. Back here, and this plug right here is for the fuse box. So all the power wires for the injectors and coil packs come from here. Can't really delete that. But back here looks a lot cleaner. And then with the power wire from the alternator, this goes to the starter, and this purple wire right here also goes to the starter. And since the starter is moved, kind of have to modify the routing of it. That's kind of why I did this wiring stuff anyway, just because the harness was kind of routed in this weird, kind of a weird way. Another thing, the rear oxygen sensor back there, it doesn't have a cat, it really doesn't need it, but it usually goes, I think it goes underneath the engine. But since I have the wiring kind of coming back here. Well, since there's already wiring for this rear knock sensor and the crank sensor, I routed the wiring for this rear oxygen sensor with the speed sensor output, and they're gonna just get wrapped with heat protective insulation back here, and then I'll just have all this routed. And I was thinking about deleting this plug, but then I thought about it, and since it's so hard to get to the crank sensor and the knock sensor, I think I'll leave this plug, but I'll rewrap everything, and I'll probably wrap it all the way up here with the high temp insulation. This is just kind of that foil stuff, which kind of isn't high temp insulation, but yeah, we're getting close. I really wanted to throw this in today, but I want to get all this wiring stuff wrapped up before, or not wrapped up, but zip tied up before I stick it in the car. It's just a lot nicer not having to bend over the engine bay to do all this, especially on the back coils and all the wiring back here. These front ones wouldn't have been that bad, but it's still kind of tedious. It's nice to just, you know, chill on the chair, solder everything really nice and heat shrink it, and just kind of go from there. So I'm going to end the video here. If you like these videos, make sure to click the subscribe button, throw a thumbs up, throw a comment below, and as always, see you guys next time.